Welcome to our Tuesday webinar series, sponsored today by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development, which is one of the 8 associations under the Universal Peace Federation USA. My name is Alan Jessen. I'm glad and happy to be the host today, the moderator. And for the sake of our new guests who may be joining us, I'd like to say a few words about the Universal Peace Federation. UPF was founded in 2005 by the late Reverend Sun Moon and his wife, Dr. Hakchahan Moon. UPF is an international and interreligious network of individuals and organizations, including representatives from religion, government, civil society, and the private sector, dedicated to achieving world peace on the foundation of mutual prosperity, interdependence, and universally shared values. As an NGO in general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, UPF works and supports the UN, particularly in the areas of interfaith peace building, conflict resolution, and strengthening of marriage and family. Today, our topic is the crisis of homelessness in America. And our speaker will share about an exciting vision that is taking place in San Diego to solve this problem through public and private partnerships, conceived and led by volunteer citizens. But, before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to say that this is a prime example. I find it, as I've learned about it, a prime example of what UPF encourages through our Ambassador for Peace program. So just a word about that. Ambassador for Peace program was launched in 2001, and it is the largest and most diverse network of peace leaders with over 100,000 ambassadors for peace from 160 countries and all walks of life. And among other things, they commit to stand on the common ground of universal moral principles, promoting reconciliation, overcoming barriers, and building peace. And I feel this project today really is an example of that. So let me go ahead and introduce our topic today and invite the speaker onto the screen. And by the way, this program is being live streamed on our Facebook page and will be available for viewing on the us.upf.org website. And again, if you have questions of the speakers, you can put them in the chat. So according to the Annual Homelessness Assessment Report, there are 650,000 people, that's the size of the city of Boston, who have experienced homelessness on at least one night in 2022. Chronic homelessness, and this I found amazing, chronic homelessness has increased nearly 30% between 2020 and 2023, estimated at 143,100 people. The majority of these were unsheltered, meaning they are sleeping in tents, on streets, in cars, public parks, or other places that are not meant for human habitation. In California, the state put aside $7.2 billion to address homelessness in the 21-22 state budget, which equates to spending nearly $42,000 per person on the homeless situation. So what is, would more money fix this problem? I guess that's a question. And what is the moral solution to help homeless without ceding the downtowns, tourist attractions, and residential neighborhoods of our cities to homeless encampments? So George Mullen, our speaker today, is leading an initiative in San Diego called Sunbreak Ranch Homeless Triage Center. With strong support of the business community and local philanthropy, Sunbreak Ranch has a plan to create a community where 5,000 homeless persons can be given temporary shelter to assist them with mental health issues, drug addiction, and job training, among other services. George is a native of San Diego. He's an artist, a writer, and a principal of Studio Revolution. And he is the one, I think, George, leading the effort with Sunbreak Ranch, right, to end the homelessness crisis on the streets. He has extensive experience in business as well, in financial markets, and is recognized as one of the few people in the world to accurately predict the 2007-9 global economic collapse in articles that he wrote at that time, The Coming Financial Tsunami and Welcome to the Bubble Economy. So that's for another day, George. But,
right.
I just was so excited to meet you and learn about the project. I think I may nominate you as an ambassador for peace. But go ahead, share with us about your project. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank Alan Jessen and Roger Weatherall for inviting me, and also the esteemed Dr. Bill Emick, who's going to help guide me along. He's a professor at Columbia. Let me give just a quick bullet point on what Sunbreak Ranch is effectively a compassion-based triage solution to street homelessness. We're not saying we're going to be able to solve homelessness. That's gone on since the beginning of time, but to end the street homelessness catastrophe. We're a nonpartisan, non-political, all-volunteer effort. I would say that we're a true citizens movement that came out about to solve a massive problem that our elected officials either won't solve or can't solve, or both. And ultimately, we think the way to solve this problem is going to be some sort of public-private philanthropic partnership where we really need all the community to come on board together to solve the problem. Again, this is nonpartisan, non-political. We're just horrified at how many people we see dying on our streets, as well as the catastrophe and the human catastrophe in front of us and what's happening to our cities. Let me backdrop a little bit about myself. As Alan mentioned, I'm a native of San Diego, born at Sharp Hospital. I'm 58 years old. I've worked in downtown San Diego for since 1987, 37 years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the super ugly. And unfortunately, we're at the super ugly stage right now. Again, half of me is an art, half of me is a writer, and I have a lot of business interests as well. So I'm neck deep in what goes on in San Diego, and I've been in Rotary, the downtown Rotary, for 35 years as well. A little bit about San Diego. I'm just going to assume everyone listening hasn't been to San Diego, though I'm sure some of you have. San Diego, you can see a picture on there now, is a spectacular setting. It's a city of 1.3 million people, whereas the county, which includes about 18 cities, is about 3.3 million. And you can see across the Coronado Bridge there, that's Coronado over there, and then you can see Mexico to the south. San Diego has about 70 miles of beautiful beaches, two very large bays, Mission Bay, and what you're looking at here is San Diego Bay and San Diego Harbor. And San Diego, let me backtrack 1 second. The region, about 3.3 million people, but we're adjacent to Tijuana, Mexico. And Tijuana is actually a larger city than San Diego. There's probably about 2 million people there. So the entire metropolitan area of San Diego, Tijuana, is about between 5 and 6 million people. And the border between San Diego and Tijuana is actually the busiest border in the world. And if you've been waiting in a line there to come through, you know, there's a lot of business coming through there and a lot of people. In San Diego Harbor, the big footprint is the U.S. Navy. We have one of the largest U.S. Navy bases in the world, with 3 nuclear aircraft carriers ported here, nuclear submarines, and a whole string of other Navy ships and Marine Corps bases. So the footprint of San Diego is the Navy and defense contractors, big tourism business, and the life sciences and education. So again, I've worked downtown since 1987, so I've seen how it changed. When I started working in downtown in 1987, very few people lived downtown San Diego. It was a very sleepy town. People would commute in and then go back at the end of the day. Over time, in the 90s and early 2000s, San Diego really became a city on the upswing. And what I mean by that is lots of buildings started happening because, as most of you that haven't been here, you've probably heard a couple of things about San Diego. One, that it has the finest weather in the world, which may be true, and that it has a great zoo. But there's a lot more to it than that, obviously. But a lot of people come here for the weather. And so San Diego really started booming. And in 2002, they built what became known as Petco Park, which is where the Padres are housed. And that's in downtown San Diego. And as you look at the picture there, you can see Highway 5 on your left corner. And that kind of loops around. Downtown is all nestled right next to the bay, whereas in Los Angeles, downtown is 10, 15 miles from the ocean. So when Petco Park went in, from my studio, I could view it being built. And then suddenly condo towers were going up, business was booming, restaurants, bars, the Gaslamp Quarter became a very happening spot to be. They put a convention center right on the bay near the Gaslamp district. So San Diego was in a tremendous city in an upswing from a sleepy, more of a sleepy, quiet town to really going places. So that was, so 2002, 2014 could really see this. Well, come about 2015, a little bit like if we were taking a 747 from New York City to London, we're about 2 hours over the Atlantic. It became a little bit like feeling suddenly you could feel the nose dip of the plane. And it's been heading steeper and steeper down since 2015. And I would say it's in a full nosedive here. And this isn't just San Diego. This is almost most of the cities on the West Coast. San Francisco's imploded itself, Oakland, Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, all following the same pathway. And what started happening in 2015, started seeing more and more homeless on the streets, more and more suddenly tents started appearing. Yeah, and here you can see a few pictures, thank you, Roger, of the reality. We look at the beautiful 30,000 feet picture of San Diego and what spectacular setting we have, but then this is becoming the reality on the streets. And it's not just downtown San Diego. It used to be just downtown San Diego. Now it's spread through much of the city. Coronado is about the only one of the smaller cities that really just has not allowed it to happen. But this is all over the place. And it was probably about 6 years ago, my wife was bordering Highway 5, about 2 in the afternoon in line. This was the first time she saw this. And a homeless guy on the corner just pulled down his pants and started defecating right there. Obviously, she called me right. She couldn't even believe it. But this has become so pervasive on the West Coast now. It's extraordinary. And San Diego was always known as a very clean city, and now it's filthy beyond recognition. Homeless encampments, openly urinating, defecating, streets that smell of urine, open drug use, open drug deals going on. I see it all the time. It's inexplicable what's happened in civilized society in these cities, and that's the reason we decided to get involved. So for many years, and through Rotary, we've helped the homeless in a variety of ways, serving meals. And here's a short video. I'll just mention what's going on here. And they've tried to clean things up, but they're not really cleaning things up. The elected officials are really doing Band-Aids. And here they've pushed a bunch of homeless out of downtown, and now they're right along the 163 highway, effectively getting them out of the downtown homeless count. And then they point to how the numbers are down. And yet you see all these numbers that are just across outside of that actual zone. And it's just the homeless spreading throughout the city. So the biggest and most shocking figure for us is, this is a compassion thing. And as civilized society, you can't let your homeless brothers and sisters live like this. I mean, you're doing significant harm. And the figure that I point out to everyone in 2019, 165 homeless persons died. It's a lot of people, right? The homeless count, let me backtrack a second. The homeless count is last year up 22% from the prior year, and they pegged the number at 10,264 homeless, with about 5,171 living on the streets. We know those figures to be dramatically undercounted. In the city, people in the know estimate maybe 20,000 homeless. In the county, 45,000, but that includes people couch surfing and such too. So it's not all on the street. So the numbers have exploded. Last year, the veteran homelessness in San Diego was up 17%, whereas nationally it was up 7%. Again, the overall number was up 22%. But again, let me go back to that number I cited before. In 2019, 165 homeless persons died. Well, in 2022, 574 homeless persons died in the San Diego region. That's an increase of 250%, which is inexplicable and inhumane. And the elected officials don't talk about it, nor does the media here, which tends to just protect the regime. And that's the reason that all of us have gotten involved. Now, we've been involved a little bit longer than that, but the reason we originally got involved, through Rotary, we'd helped the homeless for many, many years. And I'd always had an idea in mind that, are we really helping by serving meals and giving money to the homeless service providers? Because it doesn't really necessarily seem like it. And I always had this concept of doing something a little bit outside of town to help the homeless get away from the negative influences. Anyone that's familiar with the homeless populations in these cities, they are preyed upon from every side. Drug dealers, gangs, sexual predators, sexual traffickers. It is a very hard thing for them to turn their lives around. So the concept that we'd had in mind was something that we call Sunbreak Ranch, is a place a little bit outside of town, but not dramatically, where you can have a clean, healthy, safe, secure place for everyone. So anyone in need, whether it's one of us or our son or daughter, or our mother or father that falls on really hard times, they're not pitching a tent in a downtown city, that there's actually a place called Sunbreak Ranch, which is a large triage facility, not meant for long term, hopefully to help people figure out what's going on with them and get them to the right place that will help them, whether it's detox or transitional living somewhere around town. And we consider it a large triage facility. But it's key that it be a clean, healthy, safe, and secure place. And that's what we're focused on. And we've got 2 large sites in mind. We're not operational yet, but it's getting a lot of attention. And the concept would be that on Sunbreak Ranch, that all the homeless, whether they're on the streets, in the parks, on the river, canyons, that they would be brought here. And it's not a jail. They can come and go as they please. And as they would enter Sunbreak Ranch, there would be a welcome center, and all the homeless service providers will be there as well. We'll have an operation there because we want to try and grab every person we can to help them turn their lives around. And there's a lot of homeless service providers doing great work. And if we can all have them there, all trying to help. And there would also be an emergency medical tent on site. There'll be large tents where people can be. There will also be large parking lots for those that want to actually bring their car or trailer in there. There'll also be a very large area for those that want to be a little more remote and pitch their own tent. But on site, there'll be a 24/7 San Diego police and or sheriff post, and there'll also be private security. The key is that it be a clean, healthy, safe, and secure place. And part of the big thing that a lot of people don't understand, why all the cities on the West Coast have gotten where they are. There was a Ninth Circuit Court decision in 2018, called Martin versus the City of Boise. And the decision effectively said you can't criminalize a homeless person if they don't have a place to go. And we all agree with that. We want to help our homeless brothers and sisters. We don't want to hurt them. So, but that tied everyone's hands. And then a lot of cities use it as an excuse not to do anything, to say, well, we can't arrest people or move them if they have nowhere to go. So it's become just rule of law went out the window, and it's just kind of anarchy on the streets. And it looks like it. It's trash everywhere, drug deals going down, petty crime all over the place. I mean, it's inexplicable to have watched what's happened in this. And like I said, if you felt the nose of that plane dip and then just more and more of a nosedive, that's what it's felt like on the West Coast. And again, I've been here 58 years, and the last 10 has been quite something to see. So, but once you have a place where you have a clean, healthy, safe, secure place and a bed for everyone, then you can return to the rule of law and not have people sleeping on your streets and canyons and public parks. And for some reason, the elected officials just can't make this connection. So they keep complaining about why we don't have beds, instead of actually figuring out that if we supply a place with proper beds and a triage to really help the homeless, then we can clean up our streets, canyons, and public parks, and also help a lot of people. 574 people die on our streets, up 250%, is completely unacceptable. And, that's San Diego as an example, because this is going on up the entire West Coast, and it's spreading across the country, as we all know. And I'm sure Bill may mention Dr. Emick about what's going on in New York. Here is Bill Walton. He's our largest team member, literally and figuratively, I suppose. He stands almost 7 feet tall. He's the NBA guy for NBA, retired NBA Hall of Famer that some people don't know. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're trying to accomplish. And what's happened here, and just a couple of comments on business. Whereas San Diego was in a huge upswing, there was plans in downtown San Diego for there to be a large Target store come in, and that had been underway for a bit. And here about 6 months ago, they canceled because of what's happened in downtown. There was also to be a large Ritz-Carlton built just down the street from where I'm sitting right now. And here again, that project has been canceled. Restaurants are closing. Bars are closing. There's lots of, now leasing everywhere now, whereas it used to be booming. And this has a ripple effect on everyone. not only the people owning all these businesses, obviously, but also the less and less employers, which ends up leading to more homeless as well as people lose their jobs because San Diego is an expensive place to be. So that kind of gives a rough, have I missed anything, Alan or Roger, that you would like me to touch on? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay.
Yes. No, that was a great overview. I'm sure we'll have time for some other questions and things. I just a little bit digging into on the business side, George. Obviously, it's been an impact. Um, have you, so to put the project together, was it pretty critical for you to recruit business leaders? And what role do they play? And were they willing to, get involved and engaged in this project with you?
Sure. I'll give you a quick background on how this got going because I'm an average Joe or an average George, as the case may be. Uh, we didn't go into this intending to launch a citizens movement. I'd had this idea in my mind for years, and one day, a large homeless encampment on an on-ramp to Highway 5, I started boarding it, and there was tents all over the place. I just couldn't even understand how it's possible that the police would allow it. And a little kid walked out in front of my car on this ramp, and it's a ramp where you got a short runway, you got to hit the accelerator. Fortunately, I didn't hit him, and I didn't get near hitting him, but I thought, what in the hell is wrong with the mayor of the city and the San Diego police that they're allowing this dangerous situation for the homeless people, their children, and the drivers too, boarding here. So that night, I wrote this concept of Sunbreak Ranch, and I had in my mind for years. And I passed it by a good friend of mine that probably does more charity work in San Diego than anyone. I know him and his family, and he liked it and did some fine tuning, and it was published as an op-ed in the San Diego Union Tribune here in 2017. It wasn't meant. It was meant to make people think and start a conversation. Well, it really took us by surprise because we started having people reaching out, calling us, emailing us, saying, finally, and the common denominator was finally someone with an answer how to end this catastrophe. And so as people kept reaching out, then we started building it into this, the concept, and got huge traction right away with lots of civic leaders jumping on board, wanting to be a part of it. And then suddenly the pandemic hit and everything just kind of flatlined. And then as we came out of the pandemic in 2002 or late 2001, early 2002, people started reaching out again from everywhere saying, well, what's going on with Sunbreak Ranch? Well, how do we get involved? And it's been a rocket ship since then because it got so bad, everyone just finally threw in the towel. So from right now, the public is near universally with us. They're saying, yes, let's do it. Go, go, go. Most of the big civic leaders are on board, from the average Joe like myself to some of the biggest names in town are on board and want to do it. Our hurdle has been the elected officials who keep wanting to look the other way and ask for more money and do the same thing. Now, let me talk about the money there for a second. In California, it depends on the statistics, but I think in the last 7, 8 years, and I'm not sure why there's so much disparity, but somewhere between 17 and $25 billion has been spent on homelessness, and the problem has exploded. In San Diego, the statistics are from 2015 to 22, so a 7-year period. The local government, just government, this is not federal, state government, or philanthropic, but the local government spent $2.37 billion on homelessness, and it's exploded. It's the old story. I mean, you're completely failing in what you're doing with monumental amounts of money, and yet you just want more money to do the same thing. And that's why we've gotten such traction. But the elected officials, most of them they're ducking it. And that's the problem. And we do need them on board because only they can really initiate a big project like this. And once we're all on board, and we're making headway, and we keep inviting them in. We don't want this to be political. We want them on board. But once we're a unified community, then we can really go towards trying to lock down sites here. And I can talk about the sites if you want me to.
Yeah.
Um,
One question about the funding, and then I want to
sure.
invite Mr. Emick to speak. But a couple of questions, just generally, how is this going to be funded? I guess both on the upside and then sustainability. Any quick thing you can share with us?
Yeah, funding to date and everything we've done. I mean, I funded most of it, or we've funded most of it, but it's not major money. When we can actually get a green light to go forward, then we're going to need to look at public funding and philanthropic funding. And the way we see it is this is a massive problem across America, but this could be the pilot program for the country. And if so, we would like to get public funds and big philanthropists, both San Diego and outside, and say, let's fund this and do this right and prove the concept, because if it works, it's a model that can be easily replicated outside of every large city. And then you're going to save thousands of lives, and you're going to clean up these cities, which used to be beautiful, like San Francisco and Seattle and San Diego, that now look like, hell when you're on the street. And they're losing so much tourism business, but it becomes a fine line for the business interests, because they can only oppose the city governments to so far, because if they do and they get them on the wrong side, it makes it difficult for them to do business.
Yeah.
For example, permitting and processing goes through the mayor's office. So developers, they're only going to go so far to oppose, even though they want the city cleaned up, but they also have business interests. That makes sense?
Yes, for sure. And maybe Dr. Emick can just speak to that a little bit. But let me bring Dr. William Emick to the screen here. He's our respondent and commentator. He's someone who's shared with us before. And William Emick is a professor of practice in international and public affairs and the founding director of the Picker Center at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. He teaches courses in management, cross-sector partnerships, applied policy analysis, and innovation. Dr. Emick is co-author with fellow faculty member Howard Buffett of Social Value Investing, a management framework for effective partnerships. Dr. Emick, this sounds like a good place for partnerships.
Yeah, I think it inevitably is if it's going to be successful. I'm old enough that 1987 for George was the year that I was appointed the first chairman of the state commission to deal with homelessness in New York State. So on an organized governmental perspective, this goes back 40 years. And at that point, New York saw itself, New York City in particular, as in a crisis of homelessness, the same kinds of things, people living on the streets. But like a day like today, when we have 4 inches of snow on the ground and the temperature is 26 degrees, it's easier to survive on the street in San Diego than it is on the streets of New York in the winter. To try to make a very long and continuing story shorter, we had success and have had success on a continuum of solutions that George is talking about. First is shelter, temporary shelter. Then it moves to transitional housing with services. And then ultimately, if successful, people are able to get back to a normal life with a job and independent living, whether they're families or individuals. So it can work, and it has worked. Although today, here in New York, we find ourselves in a new crisis of homelessness, which has really been renamed or rebranded, depending on your point of view, to what we call the migrant crisis, which are people who have crossed the borders in ever larger numbers. People primarily from South America crossing through Mexico, families and individuals who are homeless. In the last year, we've had approximately 150,000 new residents of New York who have come from primarily the southern border here through buses, organized buses and planes, both the government and state governments shipping people to New York because we are self-identified as a sanctuary city. That is, we will help you and not report your immigration status to the authorities in DC. And our governor today just announced $2 billion in additional funding to deal with the homeless migrant crisis. So progress, but continuation. I think the concept that George is talking about I think is a very useful one, and that is to have a comprehensive. You can call it what you want, temporary service, or I don't know. I don't know what the proper politically correct term is for a place that people who are homeless, no matter what their issues are, can go and be stabilized and get food and shelter and counseling and opportunities. But I think that's what's needed. And I also think that it can't work through government. George articulated some of this. There's a politics of homelessness that affects the government, and it cuts both liberal and conservative. And neither position is helpful in terms of helping the individual. Some is, kind of a more leftist, let people do what they need to do. People need to be free. And then on the other side, it's, these people all have problems and they need to be locked up. And the answer is neither, right? The real answer, the real humane answer is not just let people have the freedom to die on the street. And it's not put these people into prison. We already have too many people in prison who need treatment, not prison. So I think both the politics of it, the money of it, and the effective governance of it needs to be what I would call a cross-sector partnership. You need local nonprofits. You need philanthropy. You need the business community. You need contractors to help run it. I saw in the chat what happens after dark. Well, these places have to be staffed in the same way that hospitals are staffed, or the same way that independent residences for travelers or young people or whatever. I mean, this has to be a fully staffed facility with different levels. I mean, you might think of it as somewhat comparable to these step facilities for older people, where there are people who live totally independently. There are people who live in a more supportive housing situation. There are people who are basically living full-time in some kind of hospital, all on the same campus, very humane, very positive. But I think this is both from a political, financial, and social professional perspective. I think what George and his colleagues are proposing is a step in the right direction. It's not going to be comprehensive. It's not going to solve everything, and you're not going to be able to do the transition to supportive, to independent living, perhaps. But for now, I think it is a far better way to approach the situation than just help people to continue to survive on the street. It's better than not surviving, but it doesn't move you anywhere. And I think, as George also said, it's not cheap. Arguably, it's costing more to keep people from dying on the street than it would be to do something along the alternative of the ranch idea. So I think there's a lot to talk about here. I think just like New York has its problems, the West Coast has its problems. That is, frankly, the weather is good enough that people can survive long-term on the street. That doesn't mean that that's what should be the case. But I think, politically, that actually becomes dangerous. That is, you cannot do something about it. But as George again pointed out, 500 people dying in a year is just completely unacceptable. So I'm fully supportive of this idea. I'm certainly here to do whatever I can to be helpful and to maybe bring some wisdom of what we've learned works and doesn't work over the last 35 plus years of trying to deal with homelessness here in the East Coast.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Emick. if you have any questions for George, please feel free to ask him. But I think I would like to ask a question here. It came up in the chat too, George, that there are some other pilot projects or some other attempts in some manner to shape to deal with this issue. How is Sunbreak different, and why? I guess is a good question, because some of them are building long-term living homes, I think, right? So George, if you're going to answer that.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just hit one point before I answer that Dr. Emick raised. In terms of Sunbreak Ranch, the architectural rendering is on this particular rendering is about 70 acres with a lot of acreage around it, just as a buffer. And if you take a look at it, and you can see it on the website, sunbreakranch.com, those separate facilities there for single men, single women, families, veterans, those with dogs. So and like Dr. Emick was saying, you want to try and cover as many groups as you can in a proper way. And there are some very hard cases, as we all know, on the homeless front. And I can't claim to have all the answers, but we view this as basically a triage center to get everyone off the streets. Just like if we had a massive earthquake here, FEMA would come in and do effectively a Sunbreak Ranch on several large areas with, the full tent cities with showers, bathrooms, mess halls, the whole thing. And that's kind of what we're looking at doing. Get the people off the street where we can really help them. So let me go to your question. Remind me again the first part of it.
How is that different from what other examples you've seen around cities dealing with homelessness?
Right. And there's this is such a conundrum, and there's a lot of people working on it. And a couple of the projects that we've looked at that, they're great projects. One is the Haven for Hope in San Antonio, and they're probably the closest to what we're trying to do. And there's, I think, servicing about 1,600 people a day from what I've read, and they've tried to have all the services in one location, and we've heard very good things about that. Another one is Community First Village in Austin, Texas, and that's more of a long term, and it's about 350, 400 people are living there in smaller, tiny homes, but that's more of a long-term type of living facility. And then there's a newer one in Reno, Nevada, that we've looked at called Nevada Cares Campus. And it's a large tent, kind of, I was going to say a horseshoe, but not really a horseshoe. It almost looks like a boomerang, a big, long tent. And it's geared to house about 600 people and have a lot of different services. So a lot of people are starting to see that this is the path. But I think where we differ is that we're looking at going at this and attacking the whole problem as a large triage and getting everyone off the streets, but not to keep them there, but to try and get them where is best going to service them. Because there's a number of transitional living places that we know of that are very effective. One in particular here called ECTLC, and they house about 500, 600 through 3 locations of formerly homeless persons, helping them get their lives together and get jobs and turn it around. And we'd like to replicate them about 10 times around the county. So we want the triage to be where we get the people off the streets, hopefully get them cleaned up, and then get them where it can best be helped, where they can best be helped. But there are, like you were saying, Alan, there are other groups out there working at this as well. They tend to be a little bit more geared towards longer term. We're geared towards being the short-term solution as the bridge to the longer term, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I found it fascinating. You mentioned that you call this an aggregate facility. And you mentioned how, like with the floods or refugee camps, it's pretty common that this has been easy to do, to put up these locations pretty quickly. And you've talked to the military about doing that?
Yeah, a couple of things on that. One of the reasons I never wrote the article, because I'd had that idea in my mind for many years, is that I'd get attacked that you're trying to set up some sort of camp outside to get rid of people. And that's not what it's about. And these aggregate kind of things have been used around the world. The UN has refugee camps in a number of spots that have been very effective. FEMA comes in all the time when there's a national disaster and does it. And you had asked something at the end of that, Alan, that I'm blanking on.
You just mentioned the aggregate facility. No, but you were going to ask the Marines to put it up or something.
Oh, yeah. So part of our concept is if we could do a redirect of the money being wasted on this problem, we could do it with billions left over for sure, no question. But there's so many hands out there drinking from this government money in obviously a lot of interest, and they're not so apt to want to give up on it. So our concept, we want to do this as effectively financially as possible. We have two main sites here in San Diego that we think are ideal for the site. One is called Miramar, and it's part of the Marine Corps Air Station. It's very center county, vast open land that there's a number of spots we could site a camp and Sunbreak Ranch. And so the concept is, and we have a lot of Marine Corps friends and some on our team. One in particular, retired Marine Corps colonel who flew hundreds of combat missions and attack helicopters in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we were talking to him about it. And he said, George, this is a perfect project for the Marines or the Seabees as a training mission. If we can lease 500, we would like to lease 500 acres and just, do the footprint on 70. We're on Highway 15. There's great access. So it's 12 miles from downtown. Great highway access, bus access, big open space. But the idea is to enlist the Marines or Seabees to come in and build out a forward military base, just like they do in Iraq or Afghanistan. They can do it in 2 weeks' time, and they do it. But according to Colonel Go, he was saying, George, this is a perfect concept because we haven't done one of those forward big bases in a long time. This is a great training exercise, and we have all the equipment in warehouses. So we're not asking to be given the equipment, and we're not asking to be given the land, but if they can assist us in leasing us the land at $1 a year or whatever, and build out the tent and then hand the keys over. And as Dr. Emick was saying, the place needs to be fully staffed. So, be a 24/7 San Diego police post on site to keep the peace. There'll be 24/7 private security. We're going to need all the homeless service providers on site to have 24/7 tents. And then we're going to have to redirect, volunteers plus redirect maybe some city and county employees to man the welcome center and this and that. It needs to be a fully staffed place so that anyone going there, like if I have fallen really hard times, I know, I can go to that place, Sunbreak Ranch, and I'm not gonna have to worry about someone sticking a knife in me or robbing me in the middle of the night. And hopefully I can try and get my life back in order. We want it to be a place where people see it as a refuge, like a refugee camp where they know they'll be safe if they go there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
I see a couple of hands up.
financially,
We're gonna get to that at the end, but it's kind of sticking with the chat. Did you have something you want to add, Dr. Emick, at all, or at this point?
No, I think George and the conversation we're having is both showing how possible this is, but also a recognition of the complexity of the detail. So, from a concept point of view, saying this is hopeless, it's not hopeless. We can do it. But recognizing that, this is just one step in a chain toward going from homeless on the street to back to a productive, independent life. And then secondly, even if we're focusing here only on the triage facility, that in and of itself is complicated. How do people get there? Do they self-identify? Well, some will. But what if they don't self-identify? Is there a way that government agencies, including mental health and drug addiction and nonprofits, can direct people, can give people the opportunity to go, encourage people to go? There's a lot of, the devil is in the detail here, and there's a lot of detail. But I think George has done a pretty good job of thinking through what those details are. And then the question is, how do we pay for it? I think that's actually not as complicated. I think once you identify the good aims and the good plan, the money from government is already available. The money from philanthropy will come. There will be volunteers and nonprofits who will use their own funding to help. I'm very optimistic if the political will is there, and it should be. And by the way, this complex team, which includes philanthropy and business leaders, can act as a subtle support system and needle to the elected officials to say, if you're willing to join, we'll say good things about you. We'll say your part of it. We'll even make you, it can be your idea. I think that's important as well.
I have
Absolutely.
a comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
Can I add one more thing, Alan?
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say, because I talked about the Marine Corps base last week, Bill Walton and I had co-authored a piece, which you can see it on the website if anyone is interested, about how we can go into action on this immediately. Because anyone that knows Bill, he's like, let's do this afternoon. But we put out a plan, tried to be as detailed as we could, about there's an airfield near the border. There's two main sites that we really think are ideal for this. One is called the Miramar area, about 12 miles from downtown. The other is called the Otay Mesa area, which is about 12 miles south. It's near the border. We'd rather be Center County, but it's a great piece of land. And there's an airfield there called Brown Field that's used. It's a big piece of land. We're trying to get land adjacent, but there's always little hiccups. Like one perfect piece of land is being used for owl mitigation. And I have nothing against owls, but it's a great piece of land and we're blocked because of the owls. But we put out a plan that said Brownfield is city-owned land. The city can declare a citywide state of emergency, because this is an emergency when you have 574 people dying in your streets. Shut down Brownfield temporarily and do Sunbreak Ranch right on the airfield, and then enlist the Marines or Seabees to build it out. And as Dr. Emick said, I think once we're all on the same sheet of music here and we all want to attack this problem, I think the money will come, because I think there's a lot of big philanthropy that wants a genuine way to solve this problem. If they saw a pilot program with real hope that could be replicated, I think the money will be there. But it's getting the community consensus, and we're still short the elected officials. So go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry.
Okay, no. There's a couple of questions interested in the mental health side. If you've been able to identify, what percentage perhaps of the homeless population suffer from mental health issues. And then another comment here says, every person has value and can provide a skill. Hopefully this operation will help people uncover their value to society.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's why we have people that want to have some job training on the Sunbreak Ranch site. I've even talked about if we could have some farming or even livestock there. We want to help the people turn their lives around and get in a direction. So on site, we want to have a real-time shelter dashboard, which we don't have in San Diego, surprisingly, so that someone that comes there, we can know where all the beds are around the county at the homeless service providers or transitional living houses, and say which ones are open right now. But we also want to have a real-time employment dashboard and put the squeeze on a lot of our business friends and say, hey, if you have jobs, try to direct some to our homeless brothers and sisters and put them up on the dashboard at Sunbreak Ranch, because we want to lift the people up and get them back. So it's really important that we do try and help all of our brothers and sisters uncover their abilities. I think I missed the first part though, Alan. What was the first part?
I guess that's fine. I think that's
okay.
Caught it. It was about the mental health. If you have an idea, identify percentage of mental health, or
yeah, Dr. Emming may have some better insight there. I mean, we could see figures all over the board, and we're hearing, God, there's at least 50% with mental health or significant drug issues. But I see figures all over the place, and I won't claim to be an expert on that. And some of the mental health issues are significant, and that's. Some of them are very tough cases, but I couldn't tell you on a percentage that I feel is accurate. Can you, Dr. Emick?
No, and I think that it would be a hard thing to really be scientific about, because even if you didn't have mental health issues before, living on the street for a couple of months and what that environment is like, you would develop mental health issues, right? There are some people who require mental, kind of residence stays, whether it be in mental health or substance abuse, just like there are people who are not homeless who have those kinds of issues. But it's a step down kind of thing. Then there are people who have have mental issues because they're on the street. Once you get them out off the street and in a stable environment and food and then a job, the mental health issues go away. I think it's good to recognize that things like mental health and substance abuse can predate homelessness, but they can also develop in homelessness. In my experience over almost 40 years, the majority of people and families who are homeless do not have substance or mental health issues. They have, or permanent, mental health issues that need treatment. It's a couple of bad breaks, it's divorce, it may be domestic violence, it could be a child with serious problems that can't be addressed, it could be a death in the family. There are lots of things that can domino to the point where someone loses everything. And coming back from that, no matter how adept you might have been before, George, you know this. It's a long ladder, and it's a steep ladder. And I think that's why the facility that you are proposing is so important, because I think the first couple of steps are the hardest ones. And if you can get people 3 steps up the ladder, a lot of them will go very quickly. We have people in this migrant situation who have resisted these kind of congregate facilities because they've already found a job and their kids are already in school. They need a place to live near where their kids are in school and where their job is. And so that leads to triage is one, but then, as you said, building a network so that people know where jobs are, building a network where people know where temporary housing or transitional housing is available, or even an apartment is available. It's got to be more, in the beginning, there's got to be more of a one-stop shop kind of place. And I think this could be it.
One of our pastors here is thinking about the families, George, and they're saying, in the back of our minds, the question sometimes is, where are the brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts of the homeless people? And that kind of came to my mind too. Would this help in identifying, who's on the streets and maybe giving a better access to them from family members if they're looking to reconnect and support them?
I mean, that's an interesting question, because, I think once you actually have this central triage, which everyone's going through, you have a lot more opportunities for that. A big homeless service provider here in town, a great guy, he'd been homeless himself, and he reached out to us and became a big, sadly passed away from lung cancer last year, but he became a big influence on us. And he said, one of the reasons Sunbreak is so attractive to me, he said, he was a guy that went around to save lives, and very faith-based. And he'd say, so George, I'll go downtown to the East Village and I'll see Joe on the street, but I can see Joe isn't ready to turn his life around. And I'll say, Joe, it's good talking to you. And then I'll come back down a couple weeks later, and I think, I'm going to go see Joe, because he would build the relationship. And then when the person's ready to start turning their lives around, he has that relationship. But he go look for Joe and can't find him, because Joe's now gone to San Diego River or Rock Canyon. They're dispersed all over the place. And so he said the key with Sunbreak Ranch is, if you really have a vast majority of the homeless there, I can be going every week and talking to Joe and helping him get to this point where he's ready to turn his life around. So I think what you're saying in terms of connecting with family, I think that's a great thing, because family connections are key if they want the connections to reconnect them. And that should be a component of it.
Very good. All right. We're kind of reaching the end of the first hour, and maybe just a few final comments, if you have them, Dr. Emick and George. And then for our audience, we'll close the recorded part of this program and open it up to a few questions, live questions, if you have your hands raised. So do you have time for a few more minutes after that, George?
Sure.
For that part? Very good.
I'll stay as long as you need me, Alan.
Okay. We really appreciate it. But any final comments, Dr. Emick?
No, I mean, I think this is really a potentially breakthrough idea. And I think, again, thinking of it not just for what can it do for San Diego, but can it be a model that can be replicated? And I think, at least for now, my answer to it both positive. I think it could be great for San Diego, and I think it can be replicated across the country. So I'm fully supportive. I'm here to do whatever I can to be helpful, and more power to you, George. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think our whole group is supportive here. Go ahead, George. Anything last you'd like to say?
Well, thank you, Dr. Emick, for your support, and Alan and Roger and all of your group. Yeah, I mean, there's so much need out there. It makes our head spin. But that, we went into it trying to end the crisis on the streets in San Diego, but we recognized that this could be a pilot program that once it's proven that it could be very easily be replicated everywhere. And then you're talking about saving thousands of lives and unleashing maybe hundreds of thousands of human potential and alleviating pain. And we're not going to save everyone. We know that, but we can save a lot. And one other thing I would just point out is what the key is. The difference is that as a large triage seeking to really tackle the problem, Sunbreak Ranch should be modular, so we could expand from 5,000 to 7,000 if the need was there, or contract to 2,000. Hopefully, we go out of business. I mean, that's what we would want because we know there's no more need. But the ability of being able to help everyone in a triage facility then allows our cities to return to the rule of law on the streets, because there's always been laws against public camping, loitering, defecating on our streets, urinating. Those laws have always been on the books. And in a civilized society, you have to have those laws, and they need to be enforced. So this way we help everyone. We help our homeless brothers and sisters. We help our city. We help the business community. We help reduce crime. I mean, the criminal activity and the drug dealers and cartel people circulating here around the homeless. I mean, it's frightening. And it's just very difficult to see how they are able to turn their lives around. Anyway, lastly, I just want to thank everyone for inviting us. It's a great honor.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And just for everybody, Roger put the website to that article in the chat. And I know that article has your 14-point bullet by bullet plan, George, of how step by step how you would work to implement that. So there's a lot of details there. You've thought through a lot of things for sure. So let's end the recording here, EJ, and then a couple people have their hands up.